And good morning to you. Welcome to an early edition of Daybreak. We're watching Hurricane Katrina as it unleashes its wrath on the Gulf Coast. Katrina could set off a long and watery road trip inland after making landfall this morning. The massive hurricane's impact will likely be felt far from the coast. Anderson Cooper has been on a long road trip himself. He's been driving all night long. Joins us now live from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Tell us about your journeys, Anderson.
Hey, Carol, good morning. Good morning, Chad. You know, I heard you talking a little bit right before the commercial break about the people evacuating, and we've seen some million people evacuating from the New Orleans area. As we drove in, I flew into Houston just a few hours ago. The line of cars was truly extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it. Mile after mile after mile, bumper to bumper traffic. I want to show you the bridge that goes over the Mississippi here in Baton Rouge. You're looking at a shot, the bridge over my shoulder. It's pretty much empty at this point. That's the bridge we crossed over about an hour and a half ago. The people heading westward, heading toward Texas. Around this area, it has pretty much slowed to a trickle about an hour and a half ago. As you see right now, there are virtually no cars on that road, but I can guarantee you, heading toward the Louisiana border in the early parts around Orange, Texas, the highways are still crammed with people because we were passing by just bumper to bumper traffic, nonstop, people trying to get out of this storm. We talked to one man at a rest stop in Texas. He was trying to get to Houston, and then he and his girlfriend were going to go to Las Vegas and try to just avoid this whole thing altogether. Here in Baton Rouge, just a little bit of rain at this point, not too much. You don't get much of a sense of what is coming. You don't really have much of a sense of the terror which is out there, which is heading toward New Orleans, possibly heading toward this area. We're not anticipating the brunt of the storm to be here. We wanted to come here to Baton Rouge to be in higher ground in order to be able to broadcast throughout the storm. One of the things, and Chad will tell you this, Carol, you got to be so careful about is this flying debris in these storms. And when you're looking for a location to broadcast from, you look around to see what around you might become airborne. One thing that is a big concern always are street lights. Something like this, which looks pretty solid, it's actually pretty rickety. If these winds get, as Chad had said earlier, 100 plus in the Baton Rouge area, something like that could just become airborne, become dangerous very quickly. I want to check in with Adori Doji, my CNN colleague, who is down in New Orleans at Tulane University Hospital, where they have moved patients to higher ground. It has got to be a very tense scene there. Adora, what's the latest?
Absolutely, Anderson. It's been a tremendous amount of anxiety all day long. Very wary of waiting to see what the storm is going to bring here to New Orleans. But here's something a little bit interesting. We were speaking to some doctors and some hospital administrators not too long ago, and they were very thrilled to hear that Hurricane Katrina had gone from a Category 5 to a Category 4. Of course, they understand that it's still packing a very incredibly powerful punch. However, less is more in this case because, as you mentioned, they have been evacuating some of their patients from one floor to another. Actually, it was their emergency room. Earlier today, the emergency room was on the first floor. They were bringing it up there, taking a look at some of the bringing them up to the third floor, and that's not just the patients, but the equipment and the staff. Those are some nurses that you're looking at. There's been police officers through here today, paramedics, the doctors, the nurses have all been working terribly hard, preparing for what they don't know. They're just trying to prepare for the very worst. At this point, it's all about the aftermath. They have been taking some rest. There's been air mattresses all throughout the entire hospital here. There are dozens and dozens of doctors and nurses and some of their family members spending the night right now, many of them trying to catch some sleep because they just don't know what the day is going to bring. Anderson?
Okay. Well, Adora, no doubt we will be checking in with you quite a bit over the next couple hours. We'll talk to you soon. That is the scene, as you heard, Chad and Carol, from Adora in New Orleans. And as I said, here in Baton Rouge, we're just getting a little bit of rain. There's really, I mean, it's in, as Chad, as you know well, we've spent a lot of hurricanes together. Yep. It is very strange in those hours before the storm really hits, where you're waiting, and everyone here is, in their homes, waiting, watching television, listening to the radio, and it's this very sort of eerie feeling. You know something is coming. You know it's going to be bad. You just pray it doesn't hit where you are. and then again, of course, you don't want it to hit where somebody else is. So it's a very strange time, Chad.
It certainly is, and I don't think, Anderson, you've ever been on that side of the eye before. We always park you on the dangerous side. This side, this time the winds are actually going to be blowing from the east for a while, and then from the north as the storm makes its closest approach. So you will actually be on this side of the eye wall itself, or the western side. I think you were there for Dennis as well. But as that comes in, it's an interesting, a completely different situation, because the water is not a threat, the storm surge is not a threat, because this is the side where the storm surge is the threat. The threat for you today is, again, that flying stuff. We've seen buildings come apart together, Anderson. I just want you to always keep an eye out there, which way the wind is coming from, and what is behind you that the wind is blowing to you, because you never know. Those things move so quickly. A piece of vinyl siding at 80 miles per hour, you can't imagine how fast that goes. I'll tell you. Well, you know, but people that don't know.
And I'd heard you say that a little bit earlier, Chad, and I can tell you a lot of people in Baton Rouge, when they heard that, no doubt breathing a big sigh of relief that the storm, because there had been some talk. I mean, the main reason we came here to Baton Rouge was just to be in higher ground away from New Orleans, and able to go into New Orleans tomorrow after the storm passes. But there had been some talk that maybe the storm would hit Baton Rouge head on. It is certainly good news for the people here that is not going to happen, because we've seen so many people evacuated to Baton Rouge and moving even further west from here. So some good news tonight. But again, 100-plus mile-an-hour winds, if that's what we're going to get here in Baton Rouge, that is certainly nothing to take lightly, as you know, Chad.
Yeah, Anderson, I've got a piece of paper on my screen here where the eye was going when we moved you to Baton Rouge. The eye, just follow the eastern side here of my piece of paper. It was driving itself well west of New Orleans and into Baton Rouge, and that was only about 12 hours ago. Right about at this point in time, 10 hours ago, the storm did make a right-hand turn of at least 10 degrees, and that's why, in fact, New Orleans may even be on the west side of the eye wall. But I've noticed just on the past couple of frames of radar that it's actually wobbled a little bit farther to the west again. Now, I don't think you're going to get back into it. It's been moving to the east, to the right, a little bit too long. You're going to still get into this 80 and maybe 100-mile-per-hour gust, but that just means that New Orleans, you're maybe back into the eye wall landfall with that little wobble. This thing, Anderson, we watch wobbles, and because 15 miles can make such a difference. Where we were in Melbourne, we had some damage. Get down to Palm Bay, get down to some of those areas, it was devastating. That was only 20 miles apart.
And how big is the eye of this storm, and how fast is it moving? Is this thing going to just sit in this area, or is it going to move through pretty quickly?
Well, the good news is no, it's going to move through pretty quickly. That is good news and bad news. Good news that we're not going to have the flooding like we had in Miami with the storm, because it sat there and basically didn't move very fast, about 6 or 7 miles per hour. This storm is moving somewhere in the vicinity of about 12 miles per hour due north. And so, yes, it will spread a lot of rain, wind, and even damage with it, but you're not going to have that sitting over the same area like Hurricane Agnes did back in 1972. But the flooding will be in New Orleans for the simple fact that at some point in time the pumps can't keep up. The pumps in New Orleans, because it's underwater, basically it's under sea level, they can only pump 2 inches an hour of water for the first hour, and then only an hour 1 inch per hour after that. And so if you get rainfall rates of 3 to 4 inches per hour, the pumps can't keep up. And then we obviously have to worry about those dikes and those levees keeping up as well. So we're going to keep watching New Orleans. You are still in the teeth of this storm, and also Biloxi, Gulfport, right over to Bay St. Louis, and even into Mobile. You're going to get a heck of a storm surge up Mobile Bay.
Well, Chad, one of the things I learned from you, I think one of the last storms we did together, is that inland flooding, which is such a concern, and which often kills the most amount of people in terms of fatalities after a hurricane. Right. Some 60% of the fatalities sometimes are because of inland flooding. And I also read that just 6 inches of water can knock a person off their feet, and 2 feet of water can float an SUV, which I just find extraordinary.
Well, yeah, the amount of water, the weight of water at about 7 to 7.5 pounds per gallon. If you get enough gallons under any SUV, under a garbage truck for that matter, it's going to lift up, and then your tires don't have contact with the ground, and then it doesn't matter whether you're steering or accelerating or putting the brakes on. If your tires aren't touching the concrete, you're not stopping or turning your car. That is part of the problem. Another thing, Anderson, I'm worried about is this right side of the eye wall moving through and into central Mississippi and Alabama. And even last night, some of the people in my neighborhood were going out and buying generators, because even through Atlanta, with a lot of rain and even winds to about 60 or 70. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot if you're living in New Orleans right now, but that will knock down a lot of trees and that will knock down a lot of power lines, and it could be weeks for people that had no intention of being hurt by this thing to get power back up into Mississippi, Alabama, maybe even as far north as Tennessee.
All right, Anderson,
yeah, it's always a concern.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll talk to you later,
We
Carol.
have to take a break. I'm so sorry. Anderson,
I
thanks.
could blather on. I could blather on for hours. You go. You got
So
important things to do.
Okay, we're going to have some of the other top stories of the day coming up in just a few minutes here on Daybreak, plus more on the arrival of Hurricane Katrina. We've got reporters spread all over the region to bring you the very latest. Stay with us.
Keep watching CNN, your hurricane headquarters.